Court Reporter with Stovall and Associates.
Hi, welcome back to Court Reporter with Stovall and Associates. I'm your host, Mike Aglinski. Our final segment tonight, we are with Stephanie Lopez. She's a creator of the Positive Pahrump webpage. And before we went to commercial, we were just talking about how this page was one of those pages that really presented a new medium for people to gather, discuss issues, discuss candidates. And we're about to discuss the future role of social media coming into politics. So anyway, during the commercial break, we were discussing that. You know, how do you feel about social media? It's one of those really interesting new things that I think a lot of the establishment, the political establishment, doesn't really know what to do with it yet.
Right.
Now, they're getting hot to it, but what do you see, I mean, for the future of it?
I think in the future, it's definitely going to be one of the only roles for voters to seek out and see about their candidates. I mean, in 4 years, next election, I think that Facebook and Twitter and MySpace is going to be one of the major roles for people to research the candidates.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of real advantages of it. One, you have real-time changes. You know, you can answer your constituency right away. As of today, it's free, which is, you know, huge when it comes to people getting the message out. And then finally, I think it has kind of an organic appeal. I feel as if, you know, people can gather, discuss, and they might walk away with something that seems more sincere than a commercial that was shot, edited, you know, slickly produced and then put on the air. So it's a very interesting medium, and I think that you are going to see more of evolution in this type of thing. So,
well, just like you said earlier, you said that there was a lot of candidates on the page of Positive Pahrump. In 4 years or in 8 years, those candidates will have their own pages as well, and they could just talk to those residents and voters and get their message out immediately instead of in a newspaper ad.
That's very true. That's very true. And you know what? And in fact, it kind of gives one of those the static lines of communication where you could send a message to somebody and give them a fair amount of time to respond, considering that I'm sure, you know, look at somebody like a Brian Coonsey who's working in the Attorney General's office in Las Vegas and still campaigning. I doubt you could ever get him on the phone. I mean, that would probably be a pretty tough thing.
Yeah.
And whereas
with
you
his
said,
schedule.
in what you said, in fact, he was playing an active role in Positive Pahrump.
Yes.
So anyway, okay. Well, leading up to you know, the general, one of I guess the more unfortunate parts of your story was that you had a duplicate page that somebody had tried to put up.
Yes.
Tell us what happened.
I was actually friended by Positive Pahrump. They had the same picture but negative words on it. And so I did report them for trying to duplicate my page. As far as I know, they're no longer on Facebook. But, and I could only see that I was the only friend, but they were trying to take some of the friends off of Positive Pahrump now and start their own page and for their own motive.
Oh, so basically you think that it was somebody's last-ditch effort to maybe, I don't know, garner some political clout or something like that?
I agree.
Well, good thing that you caught it right away, and it's
there's a few other pages too. Pahrump Politics started halfway through election season, and was solely for certain candidates, and made it very clear. So I think that
really, so there was a platform, and they were very exclusive to particular candidates.
Right, where Positive Pahrump was trying to be neutral.
Right.
Trying to be. I mean, some people knew who I was voting for and how because of just statements I said, but Pahrump Politics was very one-sided.
And in fact, do you think they had the same success in pulling people in as you did at Positive Pahrump?
I don't mean to sound cocky, but I had 2,068. They had 180 friends.
So I think it was very apparent to people that, well. Anyway, okay, well, I guess we could talk a little bit about the election, considering we've talked about the build-up and everything. First things first, you know, the district attorney's race, something that we've been talking about quite a bit. Razor-thin win for Brian Coonsey. I think it was 181 votes, I believe, is what it finally came down to. So it's interesting. I mean, is that what you saw as far as the results from people who were saying, I'm voting for whom? Or did you get these types of messages from people? On
the district attorney's race, not so much. The town board and the sheriff, yes, but I knew Brian was going to win. So as far as the town board, what happened? Would people just email you and say, hey, listen, I'm voting for so-and-so? They would send me messages. They would inquire how I was voting. I would say I liked X amount of candidates, and but they needed to make their own choice and do their own research. And then they would respond that I'm voting for, you know, Bill Dolan or Don Russ, Caroline, or whomever. And that's how I started figuring out who was going to be on the top and who was not going to be.
Let me ask you this. Did you know the top 3 candidates before as far as what you had heard?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
Interesting.
I actually was right in most of them.
Which ones were you not right on?
I was wrong on the treasurer one, and I was wrong on Brian Sandoval's race and Roy Reed.
So, but otherwise, you had a pretty good pulse.
Locally, I had them all.
That's pretty amazing. You know, there's people that pay a lot of money for that type of polling. So.
ESP.
Yeah, you might have a Pew Research Center calling you up or something. Okay, so I guess none of this really came as a surprise. One of the things that we were talking about before we started shooting actually was Dan Shinhoffen winning that seat, and I was surprised to see, I mean, how much he won by. A percentage here of, let's see, 62% to 37%. I mean, it was a very large margin of victory for Dan. Kind of surprising considering that he is a very outspoken guy.
Right. I actually wasn't surprised on that one from the feedback of Positive Prump. But I was surprised of the landslide that he got. That's what I got. But I did know that he was, from just the feedback, I knew that he was going to win.
That's pretty amazing. And you know, it's amazing because, again, like we said, with no straw polling, with the newspapers not having the ability to run any types of polling,
Right.
you know, you're almost like a soothsayer or something, right? Another one, I guess, that I thought was a really interesting race was this county recorder race. You know, we found that incumbents really didn't fare that well in these races. And Byron Foster, which he really has done a lot as far as the automation of the filing system here, but was ousted pretty handily by Deb Beatty. Is that something, again, that was reflected on your page?
Yes. Some felt that Mr. Foster was very arrogant, and that cost his race. Deborah was very natural. She's not a politician. You could tell, and she seemed very honest, and people were swaying her direction.
Now, one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting was seeing Bill Dolan and Nicole Shoup coming in the very last 2 spots for the town board.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that kind of, I think it brings us full circle to you saying that you went to a town board meeting. I mean, what leads to somebody who serves and then sees that type of result?
I personally like Bill Dolan, but towards the last 2 months, I started seeing the difference in people and what they were saying. I think Bill Dolan, my opinion only, got very vocal, and it turned a lot of people away. Negative, a little negative. And from my feedback on messages, they were saying, you know, he really didn't do his part in campaigning this year, this season. So I think they were trying to get in new faces on the town board.
Well, if it came to my personal opinion, I think what really hurt Mr. Dolan and Ms. Shoup would be the incorporation issue. And I think he was very vocal. And you know what? You can't blame somebody for standing up and saying, this is what I think should happen.
No, I think you rocks for standing up. And I'm for incorporation. So a lot of people, is one reason why I have some people that don't like me in this town because of it.
Because you're in for the incorporation.
Well,
Well, you know, one other thing I want to talk about too is the sheriff's race. And, you know, I asking so many different people about the sheriff's race, you know, I think that Tony DeMeo had a really interesting comment when he was talking about the results coming in, saying that, you know, Scott Coble was kind of like this unknown quotient. You weren't quite sure where he was coming from, whereas Tony has been involved with many controversial subjects, not by his own fault, but because Tony is the sitting sheriff, and in fact gone through some pretty rocky times in this county. So were you surprised to see that it wasn't as close as people had expected it to be?
I think the race was, in fact, really close. I think both candidates did their best that they could and ran a pretty fair and positive campaign. I like both Scott and Tony. I think that Tony had more information, was more educated, not in the department part of it, and knew facts where Scott Coble maybe didn't have an inside on the department, and that probably could have hurt him. But for the most part, that election, it is what it is, but I think that I knew Tony was going to win. I think Tony's done a very good job as the sheriff. I think people were hoping that there'd be a new change, but.
Well, you know, I think I read in the Mirror today, they were saying, you know, Tony, you know, has done a great job.
Yes.
But, you know, Coble, 4 years down the line, a little bit more experienced, and maybe the next time it'll be tough to fight him
Right,
off.
and
so.
Scott is not a politician, so.
Anyway, that wraps everything up for us here. So thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
on, and appreciate it. And anyway, we'll be back next week at 6 o'clock with our next issue of Court Reporter. In fact, we're going to have PV Times reporter Mark Waite, who's going to weigh in on the elections, okay? So thanks again for viewing, and we'll see you next week. Good night.
Court Reporter with Stovall and Associates.